But that's his worry, he says. Trudeau's pressured Jody Wilson-Raybould, and more evidence of obstruction of justice comes out, and the RCMP will continue to sit idle and not do a damn thing about it. Why? Why? Because we're terrible at holding our politicians accountable. Unfortunately, I wish that weren't so, but it is. Any update with the tariffs? So remember how in the beginning of February, we were supposed to get tariffs and then that didn't happen and Trump had a reprieve for 30 days and that's till March 4th. And we haven't really done anything. They belatedly appointed a lapdog fentanyl czar. And the fentanyl czar has gone and stood in front of some Black Hawk helicopters. They've made some fentanyl busts. They've cried a lot about what's going on, but have not embraced the reality of what's going on yet or faced it. And so they haven't done anything. They haven't done anything meaningful. And remember, well, I'll get to it in a second. SNC-Lavalin scandal rears its ugly head again. We talked about that a little bit. RFK says he's going to ban mRNA vaccines. So we'll do the Trump stuff at the end. We'll start with Trump and we'll end with Trump because Trump is hanging out with Putin and they're discussing the end of the Ukraine war and also the protection of the Arctic region, you know, the North American Arctic region, and how Putin and Trump are going to cooperate to get energy projects done. And I thought, wow, that's wild, right? Like we are already in a configuration where people are saying we're a sovereign state. And if you have to tell people that, well, you might not be. Just like if you have to tell people you're the king, you're not the king, right? Like it's just, it's a shame, but it's true. And so, my gosh, there's a lot to get to. Let's get to it. First, we'll be starting with tariffs. And here's the shot and then the chaser. Here's Trump talking about an Alaskan pipeline, energy. Okay. Energy one. Here we go.
Working on an Alaska pipeline already, which is the closest point to Asia. And as you know, the ANWR, which we've started, Ronald Reagan couldn't get it approved. Nobody could get it approved for so many years. Couldn't get it approved. I got it approved. Actually, I got it approved twice. I got it approved and Biden ended it. That was a shocker. But we just got it approved again. And we're going to be, it's probably the largest deposit maybe anywhere in the world, just by itself. It's, they say, of similar size to Saudi Arabia, so we hope that's correct. But all of this is only happening because of the world-changing results of the 2024 election.
So there you go. Trump's talking about drilling for energy in Alaska and so on and so forth. White Rabbit Warrior is sharing John Iveson's outrage. He says Trump wants to discuss cooperation in the Arctic on energy with Russia, but not with Canada. High North News is reporting Russia and the United States discussed the possible cooperation on energy projects in the Arctic at a meeting in Saudi Arabia Tuesday. Isn't that fun? Oh my gosh. How much I like two people in Saudi Arabia talking about energy projects in the Arctic north of Canada. And we don't have a say. Why don't we have a say? Well, because we don't have a military that's capable of defending our Arctic region from neither Russia nor the United States. And the United States said, don't worry, or China. The United States says, don't worry, we'll help you out. We'll send our military up there. And Canada, being the idiot that we are, said, okay. So we're already in the configuration of the 51st state. And we're surrounded by the military who are protecting their asset, Canada. So what did you expect? What did you expect? They're just being nice about it. It's a lot of freaking money. Can you imagine how much? We don't even gas up our anything for NATO exercises. We're like, nah, we'll skip this NATO exercise. We'll save the gas because they're penny pinching. And the United States, just to protect our Arctic region, gasses up a whole bunch of things. And like just talking about the gas is a lot of money. Never mind the personnel, the maintenance, the actual access, being there, getting there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Food supply lines, all the rest of it. It's very expensive to do what they're doing. And they're not doing it just for free or because we're good neighbors, right? Like it's in their best interest. They don't want the Arctic to go to Russia or China or anybody else who wants to have a stake in it. And really, I mean, they want it for themselves, right? And so they're starting in Alaska and working with Russia to develop more in the northern Arctic region. So isn't that interesting? And talking about it in Saudi Arabia. So if you want very, very distant people deciding the state, and I mean, I guess previously Saudi Arabia, OPEC, decides the price of gas, right? Like if they increase or decrease, et cetera, there's a whole bunch of impact on that. But still, it's very, very interesting. And in the era of tariffs and the 51st state talk, what does that mean? It's taken on a different connotation now, right? Stephen is talking about tariffs. Tariffs are talking about securing our border, stop sending drugs, stop sending terrorists into the United States. And what have we done? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. We've started maybe arresting some people, but I think that they leave the fentanyl labs intact so that the next fall guy who gets arrested and then released on bail and then disappears back to India, can just show up and start running the lab just like the last guy, right? Like, say my name, Heisenberg. Right? Does anybody know what he looks like? He's a little brown. So Steven says, Canada, we have no fentanyl. 1 week later, we seized millions of lethal doses at a traffic stop. I think it was 44 million. I think it was 44 million at a traffic stop, and like 44 million pills. That sounds like a lot though, so I could be wrong. But he says millions. Maybe 44 is 4.4 maybe? I'm sure I saw 4 in the number. Anyway, today, the Democratic People's Republic of Canada orders all journalists to stop covering this case by order of the King's Court. So this is interesting. Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers seize 8 kilograms, potentially millions of doses of fentanyl during a traffic stop. Okay, 8 kilograms I could see being millions of doses. Like if it was 40 millions, I don't know. One of 2 people charged in a massive fentanyl seizure near Swift Current will be out on bail. 28-year-old Kunwardeep Singh was granted bail in Swift Current Provincial Court yesterday on a $25,000 bond. If you're producing millions of dollars or millions of doses of fentanyl, do you think $25,000 would be a difficult bond to get? Like, honestly. Singh also had an immediate family member put the name forward as a surety for him. He will be under a curfew and won't be allowed to leave the boundary of Calgary without permission. So don't worry, Calgary. Any details on the case against Singh are currently under publication ban. Don't worry, Calgary. Really, nobody's going to tell you if you should start to worry also, right? Leah says, another drug lab found in British Columbia, this time on a rural property in... I'm not even going to attempt this one, so sorry about that. No, I'm not going to attempt it. I was going to attempt it, but it was going to be terrible. Melissa says, another drug lab found in Canada happening now. The RCMP have raided the drug lab in Vernon, BC. So there you go. There's drug labs, there's drugs, there's all sorts of things after Canada said, oh, no, the problem's really in Mexico, right? And well, turns out maybe not, right? Here is gov.exe. He says, after denying the Canadian fentanyl crisis for months, government says it's aware of entities like cartels who manufacture and distribute fentanyl, traffic humans and firearms. So this is a little long. We'll listen to the first minute. Here you go.
Over the last several weeks, our government has made a series of announcements to combat the production, the distribution, and the trafficking of illegal synthetic opioids like fentanyl. We made the largest investment in Canadian history into Canadian border security with a $1.3 billion investment. We will ban more precursors from entering Canada unchecked. We appointed a fentanyl czar to coordinate between all levels of government, agencies, and law enforcement to tackle the fentanyl crisis, which is ravaging our communities. And today, we're going after the money. This morning, we are announcing that the Government of Canada is listing 7 transnational criminal organizations as terrorist entities under Canada's Criminal Code. Transnational criminal organizations, including cartels, play a leading role in the production and distribution of fentanyl throughout Canada. These listed entities are organized crime groups that spread fear in local populations by using methods of extreme violence and are known for drug trafficking, human trafficking, and trafficking in illegal guns. Once an entity is listed, it is considered to be a terrorist group under the Criminal Code. It is prohibited for any person in Canada, as well as every Canadian abroad, to knowingly deal with the property of a terrorist group. To avoid criminal liability, banks and brokerages will freeze these entities' assets, which can then be the subject of seizure, restraint, or forfeiture. The measures we are taking will help keep fentanyl off Canadian streets and from entering the United States.
So we'll leave it there. From we don't have this happening to we're doing something about this thing that's not happening. It's weird, right? It's a quick turnaround, I think, really. And do you think it would have happened if Trump hadn't put the pressure on by doing what he's doing? People are upset about it. People are making all kinds of claims about how terrible the tariffs are, but they're not understanding that without the tariffs, then there's no incentive for action. then there's no incentive for Canada to do anything about anything, right? Unless there's a so what, unless there's a carrot, no tariffs, and a stick, tariffs, not going to do anything. And so, and we've proven that over and over. So here it is. And this is the tool that Trump is using to get us to move, right? Here is Bruce. He says, John Rustad, who's the opposition in British Columbia, so lists off proof that the federal and British Columbia provincial governments have known since 2022 that safe supply was being diverted. On day 2 of the sitting BC legislature, Dave Eby threw his new Minister of Health, Josie Osborne, under the bus. He left her to answer questions on why the government was knowingly trafficking safe supply to cartels. So I wonder, like the RCMP was saying, like if you're doing this and you're helping these terrorists, you're going to be charged as a terrorist. Can they charge the BC government, or would they charge like people in the BC government with terrorism? The former BC NDP Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, was sitting right in front of her. Dix never spoke to defend his role in that program or another for why he allowed 22 million pills to be purchased by the taxpayer. Don't forget BC, the NDP gave themselves new titles and pay raises before they took holidays off and shut the door on accountability. Only on the day they were going to be held accountable for safe supply did they alter the program to address the scandal. In other words, they waited until the very last second to end it. I wonder how many millions of pills were bought by the taxpayer and resold on the streets in the last month. Right, and that's one of the hard asks of Donald Trump: to stop the pills, stop all of that stuff. And the government is funding it. The government is creating the product, in fact. CTV News is reporting no assurance Canada can escape Trump tariffs despite new border measures, minister says. Yeah, I'm shocked. I'm shocked. If I was Trump, I wouldn't have nearly as much patience. It's kind of a blessing he's got so many pokers in the fire at this point in time, because, you know, Canada's getting real hot and he's kind of working over there on some other things, right? And it's kind of like, okay, we'll just hang out here getting hotter. Anti-taxer says Trudeau has been screwing around for 19 days and now this government is going to start panicking again. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Here's Juno News and True North News, Juno News. RCMP Commissioner Mike Duham confirms that there are multiple cartels operating in Canada. So here's that.
Do you have any evidence that Fentanyl operates in Canada, or the smaller cartels other than Sinaloa and CJNG? Do you have evidence of them being in Canada?
That's a question I'm going to ask the RCMP Commissioner to answer, if you're okay with that. Commissioner Dan?
Thank you, Minister. I can confirm that we do have intelligence that different cartels operate in Canada. There's also strong intelligence that Canadians have actually moved to Mexico and South America to facilitate the transport of certain commodities into Canada. So we are aware of it.
And what about the 2 street gangs that you included in there as well?
The street gangs, it's the same. The intel picture is very similar. And what's interesting, going back to Catherine's question with regards to what this does, is there's a lot of organized crime groups that are not listed that feed in from the Mexican organized crime group. So if you are supporting an organized crime group that is now listed, you're part of that, and you could be charged under the terrorism legislation.
It's interesting because they're like, I wonder what the percentage of people working for terrorist organizations through Mexico is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it seems like they're implying that there are a lot of Canadian citizens who are involved in this whole thing, and we could arrest you on terrorist charges, no less. So that's pretty interesting, if you ask me. Here is Ryan, and he says, if the RCMP know of cartels operating within Canada, why haven't they done anything about it? Yeah, man, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Here is Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh talking about Donald Trump and the tariffs. Both of them pivot. Both of them just pivot to their own talking points. I'll give it 30 seconds for each, but it's kind of stuff we've already heard before. Here we go.
Hello, Mr. Poilievre. Noah Jarvis, True North. In response to the imposition of American tariffs by President Donald Trump, Canadians have taken to booing the American national anthem at sporting events. We saw this at the first Four Nations Face-Off event, which you attended. Some argue that the booing is justified, while others argue that it is disrespectful. So at the next Four Nations Face-Off match and at future sporting events, should Canadians boo the American anthem or refrain from doing so?
I would focus on cheering on Canadians. I want Canadians to win. I enjoyed the game. Unfortunately, did not enjoy the outcome. When I sat down with my little boy, Cruz, it was his first.
Blah, blah, blah. And he talks about the hockey game and talks about how, Americans and Canadians are really, really close and blah, 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 blah. A lot of hockey, too. Here we go.
and again posting about Canada becoming a 51st state. What is your reaction to that? How do you feel about that?
He's repeating again and again his real intention here. And so for folks who are trying to say, oh, maybe it's about this issue or that issue, let's just trust his words. He wants to put economic pressure on our country to make us the 51st state. Our answer to that is hell no. We do not want that to happen. We are talking about defending our country against a real threat coming from a president who is threatening our sovereignty, but we're going to fight back. Canadians are defiant. I am defiant. I'm ready to fight back.
Thank you for defending our Arctic region from Russia. The whole thing's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I didn't really show the part where Poilievre talked about Trump. Hold on, I'll cue it up properly. Here he's talking about the fallout of booing and the tariffs, and the American people and the Canadian people are forever friends, BFFs. This is just a tiff with the president.
Just encourage everyone to remember that our disagreement is not with the American people, it's with the American president's unjustified threats of tariffs. And let's focus on building our own country up. You know, Mark Carney...
We'll leave it there. He goes into Mark Carney. It's not unjustified. It's not unjustified. It was written into the USMCA. It's about national security. It's not unjustified. There are things that I am concerned about as a Canadian who lives in Canada. I'm concerned about fentanyl, cartels, our government being usurped by China, India, Khalistan, and a whole bunch of other outside players that I can't even dream to begin to compete with. And I know what it's like to be frozen out of every level of input at every level of government, so including school boards. So it's a concerning situation, and I don't think that it's a good idea that we keep letting Poilievre frame Trump's rhetoric as anything but accurate and something we should actively try to fix as fast as possible, right? Like this whole we're a sovereign nation and we're gonna do this and we're gonna do that. I don't think that we have the leverage or the capability at this point in time. And I mean, we don't have the leverage or capability to get the Chinese MPs who we've known about for years out of our House of Commons. So it's very, very strange. The rhetoric that Poilievre's using sounds fine, but it ignores a whole lot of things that are happening that shouldn't be ignored. Juno News is reporting, moving on, this is a grab bag of governance, a short grab bag of governance. Juno News reports Ontario Premier Doug Ford, the biggest barrier blocking us from getting our immense resources to market. It's not in Washington or Moscow or Beijing, it's right here in Ottawa. We need the federal government to get out of the way. It's a minute and a half. Should we listen to it? Here we go.
You just said in your speech that the biggest barrier is not in Washington or Beijing, but in Ottawa. Yeah. How is that showing a united Team Canada front?
Well, you know, on this internal trade and making sure we get critical minerals out of the ground. So everyone's heard of the Ring of Fire. This has been going on for 25 years. Assessment after assessment after assessment after assessment. Where are we going to have assessments the rest of our lives? Well, America and the rest of the world are trying to eat our lunch. One of the most powerful tools we have in Canada is our energy and our critical minerals. Enough of the assessments and waiting around, and you know, we're doing assessments up there with Martin Falls and Webequie First Nations. They're loving it. We got to deal with Aeroland. I'm going on the northern tour. I'm going to be hitting Cochrane, Timmins, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie. I'll be up there, and I think there's 5 altogether. I think I've named all, and Thunder Bay, Thunder Bay. So we're going on a whirlwind tour up north. And I tell you, the people up north want the critical minerals. They want the forestry. They want jobs and security. And there's no one that wants jobs and more security than the First Nations communities.
So there you go. There's Doug Ford. It doesn't really get into why Ottawa's blocking anybody, like just the assessments, the forced assessments. I guess so. Maybe it's Bill C-69 that he's referring to specifically. It'd be helpful if he said, this is the bill that's blocking all of these things. Regardless, if he can deliver those jobs, he will be even more popular than he is currently. And he's currently passively popular because there isn't anybody really challenging him. I know New Blue is there, and they've got a lot of candidates, but I would guess that a lot of people don't know who Jim Cariolis is. I did highlight yesterday, and it wasn't in the free part of the show just because I flipped things up and I just shared the last part of the show instead of the first part of the show, so I apologize. But to bring everybody else up to speed, the New Blue has 108 candidates, which isn't a full slate, but it's close. And the Derek Sloan and Randy Hillier's party have 44 candidates as of yesterday. And there are rallies and there are things going on, more for New Blue than for Ontario party. But yesterday, Gov.exe was doing a space on X with both Randy Hillier and Derek Sloan, so they were chatting in there. So there are things that are happening, but again, it seems like I'm not convinced that our elections are going to deliver a different result. I think our elections are rigged, and they're going to continue to be rigged. I hope I'm wrong. Mark Miller, the immigration minister, says Ottawa commits to resettling 4,700 Sudanese refugees and reopens family pathway. So, hey, the only thing to combat these tariffs and all of the problems that we're having in Canada, more foreigners and increased taxes. Can't wait. Can't wait till the increased taxes announcement. Here is Dan McTeague. He says Brampton's Stellantis plant shuttered for longer. So the battery plant that we spent billions of dollars. Now, I think that the billions is promised and it will unlock. Now, there's certain billions that have been given, but I don't think all of the billions have been given. I think that a lot of it was based on production. And so like once this many units of batteries have been produced, then you get this much money and so on and so forth. But I could be wrong about that. But I think that the deal was structured in a way to protect Ontario somewhat. I don't think it was perfect or anything like that, but I think there were clauses in there that said if you didn't produce anything, you don't get anything. So I could be wrong. I'll have to check into that a little bit more. But I remember reading that in the first when it was first being bandied about. I'll update you in a couple of days. Okay. Here's Western Standard. They say feds to spend $46 million improving your mental health. I thought, how much, what's the details here? Because it's kind of like $46 million is pie in the sky. It's $46 million over 5 years, and they're just basically bolstering funding. And that works out to $9 million, $9.2 million a year. So I used to work in mental health, and we were constantly, the ministry would come and inspect us. We had to be compliant with ministry standards, which is fine. You don't want to have people who are, running a sweatshop or anything like that. You don't want puppy mills for children, right? It's fine to be inspected. I have no problem with that. But every year there was a question of funding and are we going to get the same funding, and staff would be worried about, being laid off because of not having funding. Now, we were always short staffed, so I don't know why people were worried about it, but it was one of those things where the funding was always top of mind, and we always had fundraisers going on. And looking back, I think to myself, maybe people were skimming off the top, but I have no idea. But there was always a fundraise going on, always. There was always a quarterly fundraising thing. There were staff who were dedicated. Their whole job was marketing. The fundraising had catering. The catering was in-house. The whole thing was very well thought out. It was like a fundraising operation that also had kids, right? The kids are the most important part, but let's do some fundraising. So anyway, $9.2 million for the fundraising operations across the country that pretend they're mental health, right? Sometimes they are, but it's less than the fundraising. If you look at the staff spend on the fundraising side and the staff spend on the operational side with, delivering service to the kids, if you don't include the psychologists, I bet it's probably about the same. Psychologists, psychiatrists, medication. Anyway, a lot of them, the medical side didn't work in I'm getting off track. They didn't work within the mental health situation. They just brought in the doctor, but the doctor was getting a kickback for that. Plus the kickback they were getting for the medication they were prescribing that didn't actually really help now that 20 years has passed since then, right? So whoops. But that was the accepted science at the time, right? And how much damage has been done, with those medications being used. And I think they're still being used, right? Get kids reliant on speed to make them pay attention to things in school. Maybe just find things that are interesting enough for them to pay attention to teach them. Anyway, Larry Brock, let's move on a little bit. SNC-Lavalin, this is a big deal. It was a big deal at the time, and it led to a rebrand of SNC-Lavalin so they could keep bilking the government and getting government contracts, right? Without too many people looking at it. Larry Brock is now reporting this scandal is kind of coming back. Explosive new RCMP records on SNC-Lavalin scandal. Trudeau should have been charged. Newly released RCMP records prove what Canadians knew all along. Trudeau and his inner circle criminally obstructed justice to kill the SNC-Lavalin prosecution and protect Liberal votes. A top Trudeau aide even admitted the pressure campaign on Jody Wilson-Raybould, or admitted that the pressure campaign on Jody Wilson-Raybould was meant to help the Liberals get reelected. But the RCMP investigation was a joke, weak, incompetent, and designed to protect Trudeau. Yep. Over 4 years, the RCMP only interviewed 4 people, never Trudeau, his cabinet, or the dozen others involved in the pressure campaign. The RCMP never considered breach of trust charges, despite overwhelming evidence. They called a probe an assessment to mislead the public and pretend they weren't investigating Trudeau. They accepted Trudeau's cabinet secrecy order and never applied for a search warrant to obtain secret PMO records. They relied entirely on Trudeau's public denials, ignoring the actual evidence. Initially, the RCMP confirmed that Trudeau and his officials pressured Jody Wilson-Raybould, the definition of obstruction of justice, when they changed the legal standard, falsely claiming they needed proof of corrupt intent to justify not laying charges. This was a political cover-up, not a real investigation. The evidence was there, the law was clear, but the Liberal government obstructed justice, interfered in a criminal prosecution, and covered it up to hold on to power. This is what two-tier justice looks like, one standard for Justin Trudeau and another for the rest of us. Canadians were lied to. This is corruption at the highest level. Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal, but is anything going to happen? I don't think so. I hope so. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope something happens. But hey, RCMP, we know that you covered up this whole thing to cover for Justin Trudeau, but are you going to arrest him anytime soon? It seems silly. It seems silly. Michael Cooper says, breaking, newly released RCMP docs reveal that Trudeau pressured Jody Wilson-Raybould to interfere in the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin to help the Liberals get reelected. More evidence that Trudeau obstructed justice. The RCMP should reopen its investigation. Trudeau is not above the law. It seems like there are a lot of people who are above the law. This guy goes through it as well. He's got documents and talking. He's got the history and he's got the current documents about what's going on. I think it's Sam Cooper's thing, but I could be wrong about that. But he goes through what's going on with this whole thing. It's 3 minutes. It's a bit long. Bradshaw says Trudeau should be made an example of for future prime ministers. Trudeau awarded SNC-Lavalin, who renamed themselves to another contract. Carney isn't saying anything about this, and I wonder why. So, this is a pretty big scandal, and it's splashed across the headlines everywhere, right? And that's super weird, right? Nobody's attacking Mark Carney for being quiet about this. Nobody's attacking Justin Trudeau. I mean, you've got Larry Brock and you've got Michael Cooper, right? You've got some people there who are upset, and that's fine. That's good. You've got some kind of media coverage, not media, MP coverage, but it's not real, splashed across the front page. Trudeau should have been charged, RCMP absent, RCMP asleep at the wheel while Trudeau robs the taxpayer or gives preferential contracts to RCM or to SNC. It's disingenuous, and it reeks of a press that's been completely corrupted, right? And terrible. It's not funny, but it's funny. But it reeks of self-loathing. If you think to yourself, my gosh, I'm not black enough for people to take me seriously in this role, maybe you should pursue a different role if you're white. Or maybe you should stop hating yourself so much. And you can do almost anything. And I mean, I don't agree with this woman's goal of becoming a feminist leader, because I think fundamentally modern feminism is very, very bad for women and bad for men, bad for everybody. So I don't agree with her goal, but you can do pretty much anything, and you can be taken seriously by doing pretty much anything. If you're good at it, and the only thing that it takes to be good at something is to practice. You can't be good at being black, especially if you're white. Right? That's not what I'm saying. But if you want to be a tennis star or whatever, now you should lean into your talents. But if you put in enough time, there was a woman who wanted to be a singer. This is an anecdotal thing from, I think it's Malcolm Gladwell, but maybe not. Anyway, she wanted to be a singer, and she didn't have any kind of singing experience. And she took 2 or 3 years of singing lessons. And what she wanted was that thing that you get where you can resonate your voice. And I mean, I can do it. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but she wanted to be able to sound like a singer. And then she got pretty good. And I think she was on the radio or whatever. And all that she did was go from not singing to singing all the time. And I mean, I sing all the time anyway, but she would have a 2-hour practice regime, and it seemed like a lot, but she really wanted to do this thing. And then she recorded things and got on the radio and has become a singer. And so you can pretty much do whatever you want. You have the potential to do anything you want. Don't let anybody tell you can't do anything you want, unless your goal is to become black. You can't do that. Well, there's a book called Black Like Me, so you can do that, but it's still like, it's kind of gauche. I wouldn't recommend it. This is a politician in Canada. This is weird and reeks of self-loathing, and you should love yourself more than that. And you can be taken seriously, just as you are. Okay.
My secret is that I want to be a Black woman. If you don't know me, you might question this. You might wonder if I'm lying or if I've really thought this through. If you do know me, you will know 100% for certain it is true. And you will find yourself asking why. Well, the answer is easy and much more complicated. The easy answer is that it's because I think that Black is much more beautiful. The easy answer is that I want to be Bell Hooks, and Bell Hooks was a Black woman. The easy answer is that I want to lead the fifth wave of feminism, and that when you look like I do, and people call you a Karen, it's difficult to be taken seriously as a leader of the fifth wave of feminism.
I think my favorite part of the video is at the beginning, where you can hear the guy in the background say, "Oh wow."
Secret is that I want to be a Black woman.
Oh, wow.
Whoa, where is this going to go? So where did this go? CTV News is reporting, I want to be a Black woman. Ontario NDP candidate drops out of race after audio clip surfaces. Yes. Well, see? So listen, if being called a Karen gets under your skin so much, find out why people are calling you a Karen and see if you can change those things about your behavior, because it's just your behavior. You could do anything you want. Talk about the hockey game from yesterday. I guess Canada won 3-2 in overtime. Melissa says, President Trump shares inspirational words for the Battle of USA and Canada tonight at the Four Nations Hockey Battle for the 51st state. And Donald Trump says, I'll be calling our great American hockey team this morning to spur them on towards victory against Canada, which with far lower taxes and much stronger security will someday, maybe soon, become our cherished and very important 51st state. I will be speaking before the governors tonight in D.C. and will sadly therefore be unable to attend, but we will be watching. And if Governor Trudeau would like to join us, he would be most welcome. Good luck, everybody. Good luck to everybody, and have a great game tonight. So exciting, President Trump. So he's watching the game, and Pierre Poilievre posted this, but then Cat Canada posted an image of him at a game, so I didn't know which one was like if he was at the game or if he was watching the game from home. Could have been from the last game, the first time the U.S. and Canada squared off. But anyway, everybody's kind of making politics out of this game. And Anti-Taxer says, why do we insist on being so lame? Chantal Kreviazuk destroyed the Canadian national anthem by changing the words, and then after we booed the American national anthem, I don't know why we're surprised that they're booing the Canadian national anthem, but who knows? I mean, with the Chantal Kreviazuk word change, I may have booed too. Here we go. Terrible. So no surprise there. The hockey game is the hockey game. And Justin Trudeau, being the D-bag that he is, puts this out. He says, you can't take our country and you can't take our game. And I said, this is not how you win gracefully. So embarrassing, cringe-worthy. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful